the first time I've worn a headset. I feel a bit like Britney Spears. Cool. So, yeah, my name is Robbie, head of sales at Paddle. If you haven't heard of Paddle before, we're a payments and billing platform, and we work exclusively with software companies. So if you think of web apps, applications moving to the web, anything digital, Paddle supports payments for them. We're pretty lucky in that way because we work with about 4,000 now, so we're seeing all the really cool stuff that software companies are doing. And one of the best things is they can be kind of global from day one. So we're really fortunate to see what companies are trying, what they're testing out, what's working, what's not, and kind of like swap ideas with each of our customers. One of the big things we want to talk about today is some real tips on how you can make the most of acquiring customers who are on the web, and then also some retention strategies too that we use with one of our products called Retain. So a bit of background on kind of like industry data that we've seen. So web to app is definitely growing. I think this stat's already been shared earlier, but ad spend on the web from Meta has been like growing 50% year on year in the last few years. And a bit of context on Paddle. So I looked at the data of our top 10 customers at the moment at Paddle. So they're all digital products, software, so kind of photo editing platforms, chatbot extensions, a lot of AI companies as well. Out of that top 10, 4 of them are what we would call like cross-platform. So they have mobile app revenue in the App Store, and then they have web revenue with Paddle. We were looking at those kind of 4. It's actually about 25% of the revenue as well. But that subset of 4 customers are growing 30% faster than the other top 10. So like even the trend we're seeing on our side, the companies who have a web and an app store channel, are growing faster than kind of the norm as well, which we're seeing, which is super interesting. Let me click again. Cool. So there's plenty of reasons why companies are doing this, moving to web. It's not just the kind of obvious, let's save some money on App Store fees, but there's a whole other bunch of ones. So if we think of like the audience that you can target, or like your TAM, your addressable market, there's only a 15% overlap with consumers who go on the App Store versus on the web. So you're almost kind of like doubling the audience that you can potentially be selling to. But then opens up a huge amount of flexibility with like retention as well. You're quite limited with App Store's kind of like churn prevention tools, so opening up to the web gives you a bit more flexibility to improve kind of like retention and monthly churn. So I'll show a few examples there. So who's doing it on the Paddle side? Let me just clicker's working. There we go. So yeah, some familiar names here you might all recognize, but it's quite interesting. We talk about web to app quite a lot, but a lot of these are kind of web first and adding mobile App Store channels, and then the other kind of vice versa. They wouldn't kind of describe themselves as web to app, but more like cross-platform when they see an opportunity. So some good examples here to download on iOS store, but then also just go on their website and see their kind of checkout flow and sign-up process. They kind of treat that customer as one single customer, not like a iOS or a web user as well. Leonardo, for example, is quite an interesting one. Web-first kind of Gen AI platform. We're asking them, they recently just launched an iOS app, so kind of moving into the app space, kind of the other way around. Their main kind of reason behind that was just a much better experience for the customer. So they want to give that customer more flexibility to use the mobile versus desktop. And they're very happy with them paying the 30% extra because it just opens up a better user experience for the customer. So I think the App Store is actually pretty underrated when it comes to payments, and we'll touch on that in an example. So obviously 15 to 30% is pretty expensive, but what you get out of that in terms of payments is pretty best in class. And I'll just show you kind of a bit of a view on like what that actually looks like compared to taking payments on the web. If the clicker's going to work. Here we go. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with the term kind of merchant of record, and this is essentially what Apple and the Play Store do on behalf of anyone who's selling on the app. So taking payments is kind of a given, but they actually assume like full liability of that customer. And there's a bunch of positives to that, and obviously the control thing is another topic, but you, as a kind of app on the App Store, you never have to worry about sales tax liability, handling chargebacks, refunds. So we kind of take it for granted when we're selling on the App Store. It's a really good model. This is kind of exactly what kind of Paddle has on the web. if I just click over. So yeah, Paddle has that same model. We've been around for 10 or so years. We've seen that work really well in the App Store, and that's kind of exactly what we want to replicate for customers selling on the web. So you upload your products, land on the checkout, and then you never have to worry about localized payments, taxes, all of that fun stuff. Option 2, and there's kind of a pros and cons to both, but you can go direct. So this kind of removes that merchant record liability, and you go direct with payment gateways. Pros to that, you have a bit more flexibility to build things out, but you do open yourselves up to chargeback liability, taxes in different markets that you're selling to. So there's definitely things to look at on both sides. Wanted to touch on a few tips on how to get the most of converting customers now. I know we were talking a lot about onboarding flows and how do we kind of convert customers to the end side. So wanted to touch on localization as one strategy. And there's actually a whole bunch of things when it comes down to localization. So we kind of think, okay, am I seeing the right language that I can speak? That's obviously a given. But if we think of all the cosmetic ones at the front that really builds trust for the consumer once they've gone through the payroll, they've gone through the funnel. If I'm seeing my local currency, so if I'm in the UK and seeing pounds, that's a massive plus for that trust. Am I getting the payment methods that I'm used to, like PayPal? And am I actually seeing a price that's matching the willingness to pay for the market that I'm in? So there's a whole bunch of things you could be making the most out of to actually really help with those conversions at the first point. Also a bunch of back-end stuff. So how many payment gateways do you have? Do you have a local acquiring bank? Do you have local entities where it's a local transaction rather than a cross-border trying to sell into South Korea from Poland? There's lots of reasons that can trigger the customer's bank to decline it. I can kind of geek out on payments a lot, so I'll try not to go too deep on that stuff. So kind of on the main one from a localization perspective, let me just go over. A bit of lag on the clicker. Nice. So what you can see here, so this is across all 4,000 Paddle customers, and this is the sale of payment methods being used at different countries. And this is non-credit card. So if we start on the right side here of the US, this is showing about 60%, 65% of consumers in the US pay with credit cards. So credit card, debit card, Amex, so the most popular method. And we've got about 30% with PayPal, and then 5 or 6% with Apple Pay and Google Pay, and this is all on web checkouts. If we swing way over to the left side, Alipay is kind of the US version of credit card. So if you haven't got that payment method and you're trying to sell into China, you've got 80+% of your consumers not seeing the right payment method, and that's going to have a massive impact on conversion rates. So having that local payment method really helps conversions and gives that option to convert those extra customers who might not have before. So yeah, definitely one to look into when you're launching on web. Really got to push this clicker a few times. Nice one. I think we spoke a little about localizing price in one of the sessions earlier. So we did a survey of a group of SaaS companies a couple of years ago, and we found that 50% of companies on web, digital, weren't actually localizing their pricing. So as an example, Calm may be selling their monthly subscription for $10, and that's just $10 around the world, no matter where you're based, which kind of works from a simplicity perspective, especially as you're getting going. But what we found is willingness to pay has a huge impact on conversion. So if I jump to the next one. Cool. So this is a benchmark of the US being kind of 0%. And if we think of I don't know if anyone's been to Scandinavia lately or going to a coffee shop, how much more expensive it is there in the Nordics. That means their willingness to pay is a bit higher, and you can actually be charging more in those markets where compared to the US. Flip on the reverse side and kind of a few more developing markets. If you're trying to expand into Southeast Asia, Brazil, the willingness to pay is a lot lower. So if you're having that same price you've got in the US, you're going to have lower conversions. So it's definitely one to be testing. Not to say you should be tweaking it all the time and leaving money on the table, but it's definitely one to be looking at as well. Another really important example, which is quite an interesting nuance. I don't know if people have been to the US lately, but they are quite unique in terms of how customers pay with tax. And we kind of call it tax-exclusive pricing or tax-inclusive pricing. So say you go to a shop and you see a coffee for $5. When you get the bill, they'll add tax on right at the very end. So you kind of see the price, but then tax added. It's the same with paying online. So they're actually used to that tax being added on right at the final step. In Europe, like, we kind of hate that. If we see a price and then we get to the end and then it's getting added on by 20%, like, that's going to have a massive impact on conversions dropping. So to really get the most out of your customers in the US versus the rest of the world, like, tax-exclusive pricing in the US is much more better, and then everywhere else is inclusive pricing, just with especially like my price-sensitive customers. So yeah, definitely want to think of on the pricing side as well. Just jump over. And yeah, this is kind of like the benefit of localizing. So we surveyed a group of customers who weren't localizing in certain areas, and then those who were. As an example, a cohort who were localizing pricing, so tweaking the prices depending on the market. That cohort were growing 30% faster than the ones who just had the $10 example across the board. So hard to test, not to say to do them all at once, but there are some real strong benefits to localizing in the different markets you're selling to. So yeah, next one, I want to talk a little bit about churn. Again, when you open up onto the web, there's a whole more bunch of flexibility you can do in terms of like dunning and like really reducing failed payments. So let me just show you like what that kind of looks like. So we acquired a company called Profitwell, and they have 30,000 subscription companies integrated to their platform. So we're seeing like a huge amount of data on like what good looks like and benchmarks in different markets. This is a very broad one. So this is just B2C churn across the board on all customers using Profitwell, and this is B2B. So an interesting tip there as well, like if your product can be B2B, like churn is typically lower and LTV is higher. But yeah, that's kind of like a benchmark of like what the standard looks like. But there could be so many different variants, like per industry, per category. AI as well is another one. And if we talk about like the benefits of really, really small improvements you can make to reduce churn, like it has a massive impact. So say you have a cohort of 1,000 subscribers in Jan, and your monthly retention is 85%, you're going to be left with 1,600 by the end of the year. If you can make some small tweaks to get that to 90%, you'll literally double your revenue by the end of the year. So there's some small stuff to here which can have like a massive impact compared to the onboarding and acquisition side. So I guess the main thing is like understanding where churn comes from, and there's two big buckets. Like most people think people cancelling a plan is because I'm using another product, I'm going to another competitor, someone's leaving the Adidas app to go to Strava, for example. It's not got the features I need. There's a whole other bucket, which is up to 40% of churn, is actually what we call like involuntary churn. So they're not actually actively choosing to cancel, but there's a whole bunch of things that are going on that cause that customer to churn. We call that like involuntary churn. So credit card failure, I've run out of money on my card's expired, there's a whole bunch of things. So you can actually make quite a lot of tweaks here on the payment side to really reduce that churn. Show of hands, like who has a cancellation flow set up on their app? Or who doesn't? Most people? Not yet. So like cancel flows, there's like no reason not to have a cancel flow set up. Like you don't want to be adding friction, but it's so valuable to collect user feedback, like why they're canceling. But then there's also some really cool like win-back strategies and other flows to like retain a good cohort of those customers. I'll give an example here. So the first thing you want to be capturing is like why they're leaving. So is it a product feature that they're missing, too expensive, poor support? You actually want to be getting some like positives as well as the next form. Like what was good about the products? Like get some positivity going before they leave. And based on that, there's a whole bunch of things we could be doing as a response. So let me just click over. Oh, there we go. So like here's a quick GIF example, but most of our customers have something like this. So I want to pause. I'd rather just cancel. Okay, how about 20% off your next cycle, and we'll keep you on for a bit longer. Like a downgraded customer, a paused customer is still way, way more valuable than a fully churned, because you're saving their credit card on file. It's really easy to like one click reactivate them back as a customer. So yeah, your offboarding is really, really, really valuable to have set up properly. Almost as important as your payables and your onboarding flow as well. So definitely one to add when you're on the web. I haven't seen a good reason where it hasn't worked. Nice. And this is just to give a view of like the impact of that across our Profitwell customers. So if we look at the far left one, so if your ARPU is between $1 to 25, the left line is churn of customers who don't have offboarding flow, sorry, and then 7.5 is for those who do have a cancellation flow. So the numbers show it's like definitely worth getting set up on your app and on the web. Cool. Nice. The other one is kind of like term optimization. So if we look at like the LTV per different plans, it's super important to like test what's working well for your customer specifically. But what we've seen typically is annual is got a way higher LTV than monthly, especially on the web. And to give an example, it's how do we get customers to pay on the annual plan? You want to do that as the get-go. Often it's like 10% off. Pick the annual versus the monthly. But there's actually a whole bunch of strategies you can be putting in place, like post sign up for your monthly subscribers. And I'll show you an example. So has everyone heard of, let me just put it up now. Has everyone heard of Whoop? They're like health tracking app. Yeah. So yeah, really cool. So they use our Retain product. And we set up some really cool kind of term optimization strategies with those. So this was an email that's sent to their monthly subscribers. And we didn't blast it out to everyone. It was like a small cohort to test out the uptick. But it's like, hey, you're a monthly subscriber. We're tracking the ones where their engagement's really high as well. How about a limited time offer to move from your monthly plan to an annual? Here's the discount. Here's a link to click. And because that's all hooked up to the payment system, it's like a one-click move them to annual. They tried that out with their like high intent customers on monthly and saw a huge uplift of them moving to annual, and that had a really impactful results as well. So yeah, get them on annual to start with, but then there's actually a post kind of sign up strategy you can move customers to annual. I won't nerd out too much on payment failures, but there's a whole bunch of things you can be doing to reduce like expired cards, insufficient funds, based on like what we get back from the banks. And I'll show you an example. So people from all around the world get paid in different times of the month. It's really interesting. So, and then when we try a renewal, and then the bank declines it, they'll send back a reason code to the merchant or the app or the seller, and it will say like insufficient funds, do not honor. There's a whole bunch. If a user has insufficient funds on their bank and we get that back, there's no point kind of retrying that straight away because we're going to get the same outcome. They're still likely not to have funds in their account. So the best kind of retry strategy for that is let's wait 3 days or let's wait 5 days when it's more likely they have topped up money in their account or been paid during that time of the month. So there's a bunch of whole things there depending on how do we retry failed credit cards and get the most out of customers who actually are still using the product, want to, but are getting cancelled out because of payment failures. So yeah, another one to be making the most of. Cool. Let me go across. Nice one. I realise this is the end part, and I don't want to spend too much time on sales tax because it's probably not the most exciting topic here. I think everyone takes this for granted when they're selling on the App Store because they take on full liability of the sale. You never have to register for sales tax. You never have to file in different countries. The main kind of rules when you're selling globally is there's about 40 plus countries now where depending if your customer's based, you should be filing taxes in that region. And it's not applied for like where you're based as a business. So if we're based in Poland and we're selling to the US or Brazil or Mexico or South Korea, we should be paying and filing sales tax in those markets depending if the customers are there. So it's not the most like exciting thing to do, but it is like a thing that we have to be doing. And the great thing is the App Store does that all for us. There's no thresholds for a lot of these markets as well. So India, for example, if that's a market you want to scale into, your kind of first sale is liable for sales tax, and one that kind of, there's local partners that can help and tax solutions, but again, it's another thing to think about when it's, we want to focus on the product, grow into the new markets. We don't want to get held down by boring sales tax regulation. Cool. And again, the real plus is App Store and Paddle has that same model, so you never have to think about sales tax when selling globally. There are solutions that you'd need with kind of a Stripe, Braintree, kind of PayPal setup as well. But yeah, the good thing is you never have to think about it with the App Store. Another important thing, I think we touched on this, is chargebacks. So selling online, opens up to like a huge kind of amount of like credit card fraud, risk, poor support. Customers can just call up their bank and say, I'd like to have a chargeback, even if you've been using your product sometimes. If that chargeback rate, so if you have 100 sales and 1 chargeback, that chargeback rate goes to over like 1%, you do put yourself at risk of payment gateways, just holding your funds, closing down your account, which is quite stressful when you're kind of like scaling up marketing, growing into new markets, and then you get blocked by high risk. So one to be thinking about when you're on the web, and that make sure you've either got like risk setups in place, your refund process is quick enough. That's another reason why that could be one to look out for. Cool. So a few key takeaways. So like the app and Play Store acts what we call like merchant records. So like definitely underrated in terms of when it comes to payments with payment methods and selling into new markets. Web to app's definitely growing. Like we're seeing a huge trend of that at Paddle and some of our clients who are doing this, and then also going in the reverse. But it's definitely not guaranteed success. Like it does require lots of testing, lots of iterating, and it might not necessarily work for your type of user. So, but it is one to test and just see how it goes, because there are some good benefits when it works well. Once you do open to the web, localizing and like tackling churn are 2 very big levers on like how do you increase conversions, but then also how do you retain those customers that you're acquiring as well. So yeah, 2 big things to pull when you're selling on the web. Nice. I think that's for me. Cool.